Hello, hi. Good morning. I'm incredibly impressed that so many people are here at 9 o'clock in the morning. I go to many conferences and there's often a bit of a gap at 9 o'clock in the morning, so you're obviously a very enthusiastic audience, which is great. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself. I run a company called Family, Kids and Youth, and we specialise, as it says on the tin, in research with all things to do with families and children. But I actually have two hats, because I'm also an academic at the Faculty of Education at the University of Cambridge, where I do some part-time teaching for postgrads. And I also do quite a lot of research at Cambridge, through Cambridge as well. Much of my background and my research background has been children and what was the internet. We used to sort of measure children's use of the internet. And then as they began to adopt more digital technology and social networking sites, etc., we've been monitoring that as well at Cambridge. So that's kind of where I come from. So two hats. Family, Kids and Youth is the research arm, and that's based in London, and then I'm also based in Cambridge as well. And I'm here today to talk to you about Tablets for Schools. Tablets for Schools is a corporate social responsibility project, and it has several aims, really. So the main aim is to enable all school children to have access to tablet technology and to transform the way they learn. Now, that's a very big statement. But you know, these things often have to start off with very big statements. Our role in this has been, goes back probably 18, 20 months when we were approached by the Car Phone Warehouse. And the idea of this corporate social responsibility project was actually dreamed up by Andrew Harrison, who's the CEO of the Car Phone Warehouse. And he thought that the idea of actually giving every child, which we all know about, access to the internet was very, very important. And that if they could have access to the internet as a one-to-one device at school, that this would be fantastic. And that's kind of where he started from. And he'd had various conversations with various people around the world. He travels around the world and he goes to meet Apple and he goes to meet Microsoft and he goes to meet Google and all the rest of it. And he had come up with this notion. So he approached us as a research company and said, look, just find out what the state of the art is. So we're talking about summer 2011, and it is amazing, this project, that we move on so quickly that you kind of forget what it was like in 2011, considering we're only in March 2013. And we did research around the world, and looked really at literature research. I don't mean we travelled around the world, we did a literature search. And we looked at all the research that had been done, both academic and through manufacturers and through government departments. And of course we were very, very surprised and overwhelmed by what we found. Because we found that the adoption of tablets, and I am talking specifically, of course, about tablets, and the notion of a one-to-one tablet had really been looked at very thoroughly, far more than we had done in the UK. So we found Turkey, Western Australia, lots of states in America, South Korea, Singapore, etc., etc. Incredible things going on, and actually a lot of support by government. We also discovered 3 schools in the UK, state schools. We wanted specifically to look at state schools and secondary schools that had actually just beginning to think about that process of adopting one-to-one tablets. And I'm going to be telling you about those in a moment. So these initial ideas were kind of presented back to the Car Phone Warehouse in about August, September 2011. And they in turn took them to the Department for Education. There was several meetings, and one of which Michael Gove was at, and also to the Cabinet Office in Downing Street. Just to say, look, do you know what's going on? Do you know what's going on in other countries, particularly, not just in this country? And of course, they were very, very interested, but they also said they had no money. So the thinking then was, okay, where's this going to go? What's going to happen? By that time, and you can imagine, and I know that I've already talked to a few people in the audience, and I know that you're a passionate lot. and you really believe in technology, but we kind of don't quite know where it's going and what to do with it. Well, we had all become completely immersed in this, I suppose. And it's very difficult because as researchers, we have to be quite detached. But in fact, we'd kind of got sucked into this notion. So we decided that we would actually do some more research. Meanwhile, Tablets for Schools, as it became known, got bigger and bigger. This is their website, and as you can see, it has some very big sponsors now and supporters. And there are lots of names that aren't on this list who are supporting us, even though they're not actually, giving money in kind or tablets in kind or whatever. So we're getting a lot of support. I have to emphasize that I'm very much the research arm. I'm not Tablets for Schools, so we are very much involved in the research. We are on the steering committee. And we meet every month to talk about where we're going and where we've been. So many organisations, including Naace, I have to say, who have been immensely supportive and helpful to the team at Tablets for Schools in terms of kind of, well, this is what you should do, this is where you're going, because we're not experts. We might be experts in, know something about educational research, and we know something about technology, but we don't have the stance that many of you in this room will have, and of course that's very valuable to us. And we're always looking for more support and more help, of course, or just information, which is great. We know, of course, that the future is touchscreen. That is what manufacturers are looking at, and that's what they're doing, and that's what they're producing. And we did some research, which I'll be telling you a little bit more about in a minute, that looked at touchscreen and children. This was actually done last year, in the summer last year, and I suspect this has moved on again. But you can see here from these figures, this is a nationally representative survey in the UK. You can see that 6 out of 10 children aged 7 to 16 are already using a smartphone, a tablet, or an iTouch. And of those, 80% are downloading apps, which actually equates to 47%, nearly half of all children 7 to 16 downloading apps. Now, that's their life, that's the reality of their lives. We're not necessarily talking about school, of course, this might be at home. So touchscreen and the fact that children are already using this technology of touchscreen tablets or some other device and are downloading apps is very, very important to remember. So the research, I'm going to be taking you through the research that we've done so far, and then I'm going to go on and tell you about the research that we're doing at the moment and where we're going with it and what we're doing. And your sort of thoughts are going to be very beneficial to me, so I'm hoping that I'm not going to spend too long talking to you, because I would really like to open a debate and have lots of questions from you, because that would be very helpful to our research. So the research objectives on which we based our research questions were to really find out the feasibility. Great idea, one-to-one tablets, but is this feasible? Is it going to work? What are the benefits? Will children change? Will schools change? Will teachers change? Will parental attitude change? Big questions, actually, and of course we have to be very realistic about how much it is we can actually answer. But we're trying, and we're trying very hard. I have to say that the question, as you might expect, that we're always asked, and that probably it has the greatest expectation from this research, is does it change attainment levels? And you will know, because you're all educational experts, that actually measuring attainment is incredibly difficult, but it is something that we're very conscious of and aware of. So the research background, we carried out stage 1 in the last academic year, and we were able to work with 3 wonderful, wonderful schools that had adopted, of their own volition, nothing to do with us, they'd already decided and gone through this process way before we talked to them, to adopt tablets. So Longfield Academy in Kent, Wallace High School in Belfast, and Honeywood School in Essex. And at each school, we carried out interviews, and we did focus groups, and we talked to parents, and we talked to children, of course, and we also talked to ICT departments. And we also found, because we weren't expecting it, but because we found such a huge impact on SEN children, we also talked to SEN teachers or departments, depending on the school. As well as that, we carried out a very large scoping review that we kind of have kept going all along. We're still doing it to find out what tablet devices have been adopted in other countries as well. So we're carrying on with doing that background research. Our method was really to focus, we had to focus on one school because we didn't have a huge budget, and it was easier to focus on one school in depth, although we kept contact, and still do of course, with Wallace High School in Belfast and Longfield Academy in Kent. And we decided Honeywood would be a school to look at. It was kind of semi-rural. It was quite an interesting school. It wasn't a brand new school. They had quite a few challenges in terms of an old school building. And we also decided to have a control school. Now, it wasn't a real control school because obviously in pure research, a control is exactly the same. But this was a school that was in the same area as Honeywood. And slightly different demographic, but we wanted it because we wanted a school that didn't have one-to-one tablets. So we had one school in the same area and one school without tablets in the same area. And also we wanted to understand what the thinking was about this school that had adopted one-to-one tablets. So we talked to two primary feeder schools that could have gone to either the school with tablets or the school without tablets. And we talked to parents and to teachers and of course to pupils about what they thought about this school down the road that had one-to-one tablets. So quite a big piece of research, very thorough. We ended up doing 18 focus groups, but we also did in-depth interviews with staff, and we talked very much to lots of the leadership teams and the ICT teams as well. We also did, which was probably in a way as interesting, we did a lot of ethnographic observation. Now, ethnographic observation can be sort of interpreted in many ways. What we actually did was go in and sat in many lessons of different types, because we thought we ought to look at maths and we thought we ought to look at English, etc. But we also looked at other things like woodwork and art lessons. And we sat and we filmed and we took notes as well about what it was that was actually going on with the tablets. And as you can imagine, we found lots of different things. But it was actually a fascinating exercise, and we've got hours and hours and hours of film. I'm going to be showing you 3 minutes of film halfway through this. So a lot of research. We also did this what we call digital kids and youth research, which was nothing to do with the tablets, but it was a representative sample of UK parents and children and teachers. And we did that last summer. All of our research can be found on the Tablets for Schools website, and I urge you to visit that because we're updating it all the time. And if you want to read the full report, you can download it. It's 95 pages long, but you're very welcome to download that. Or if you want the shorter version, there's also a management summary, which is just 10 pages long, so you might want to start off with that. Of course, it's constantly changing. This was actually published in on the 4th of December and put online then. Last year's, and it was up to date at that point. But of course, we found out lots more, and we're only in March now, because it is, as you will know very well, a constantly changing subject, which makes it very interesting and dynamic, of course, as well. So let me quickly show you the free schools. So Honeywood is in Coggeshall in Essex, and it really had decided to adopt tablets as part of its new learning. It had a new pedagogy, and it wanted to encourage pupil-led learning. And it decided very much, and Simon Mason, the head teacher there, and his leadership team decided that tablets was the way to go. They looked at many, many different devices. They thought of bring your own, they thought of laptops, but they decided on tablets. And at that point, actually, the only tablet available was, in fact, the iPad. And when they first started, it was the iPad 1, and then came the iPad 2 with the camera and film video option. So they decided that was the one they would go for. And it was very much about promoting independent learning. Our control school was the school, Alec Hunter, that didn't have tablets. And I want to thank them very much because I think it was very brave of them actually to stand up and be the school that didn't have the tablets, and they were very good and allowed us to go in and do the same number of focus groups and talk to teachers, talk to pupils, and talk to parents there. And actually they're now still part of our research, and they are now using tablets, which is quite interesting, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Longfield Academy introduced iPads at the same time, again of their own volition, very much part of the new school building that they moved into in September. And again, the staff there have been absolutely fantastic to us, allowing us to go in and sit in their lessons and kind of generally be a nuisance, really. But they've been amazingly enthusiastic and supportive to the whole scheme. They had decided to adopt Apple. It wasn't particularly for any reason, but again, it was because iPads were around. And they entered into this new school building with one-to-one iPads and basically Apple technology. And then Wallace High School again in Belfast. So we had three quite contrasting schools with all the, I suppose, challenges of a Northern Ireland school, Belfast school. And they had always had a focus on ICT. And they also decided to adopt tablets. So I'm going to take you through some of the very key findings. And I thought you might want to know about the decision-making process, because a lot of schools, and I've just been talking to a colleague in the audience who says actually lots of schools say we want to adopt tablets, but they haven't really thought out why that is. So what is the decision-making process? Well, in each school it was different, very much as Honeywood, as I said, had decided already to adopt tablets because they wanted to have this change in pedagogy. They wanted to change the way children learn. And it's almost a philosophy that they had, that they decided tablets would sort of fit into that. Longfield, as I said, was very much a brand new school, and they trialled tablets and netbooks, and they tell a wonderful story there actually of half the children in 1 year being given tablets and the other half being given netbooks. And of course, the children who were given the netbooks didn't even open the boxes because they realized that the other half had tablets and it didn't work. And I think that in itself is quite interesting because at the time, Apple and iPads were very, very big. And I'm going to say something about that in a minute. And then Wallace High School very much wanted enhancing their existing technology. And actually, it was quite driven by parents, interestingly. Parents coming and saying, look, you know, our kids are using their smartphone, they're using laptops, can't they bring their device into school because we think it would be really useful? And the school deciding, well, no, because their pupils were quite diverse, from diverse backgrounds, and they wanted to have a sense of equality. So they decided that the way forward was to actually have tablets. The question we're always asked about it, oh no, let me just say this actually, the role of the head teacher. I have to say in these schools that we're talking about mavericks, really. We're talking about teachers and leadership teams and head teachers who are going to go for it. They don't see a problem. There are lots of problems, of course there are. It's not an easy thing to adopt one-to-one tablets through a school, particularly new ones as they were at the time. You know, now everybody, probably lots and lots and lots of people have some sort of tablet device. Then it wasn't the case. So they have been particularly, and it's very, very noticeable that these teachers are not kind of normal teachers, if you like. They are mavericks, and they don't see problems. They only see the positive benefits. And one has to say that that probably isn't typical of every school. So funding, which is the one that we're always asked about, the question we're always asked about. And basically there were two routes. And Longfield and Wallace High had a similar route in that they leased the devices to the parents for a monthly fee of £16 in the case of Longfield and £15 in the case of Wallace High per month, per child. Now obviously for parents with several children in the school that became quite expensive, so where there was a problem they were able to help that parent out so that not all parents were paying that fee. The teachers were given a device, they were given a tablet, And that helped them kind of come to terms with what, how you use tablets in class. Honeywood was slightly different in that they also leased the tablets, but they gave the tablets to the children. And so no child had to pay for it. But they didn't give tablets to the teachers. Now, quite a few teachers already actually, as it happened, had iPads. And some actually bought them, and they could buy them at a reduced rate as part of the leasing agreement, but they weren't given tablets. So it was slightly different, well, quite different, really. Honeywood's leasing agreement was done at a cost of £133,000 per annum over 3 years. They wanted to do it for 2 years because they realised that after 2 years, which will be coming up, it would have been the second year now, that the device might be obsolete, but it was too expensive. So they were kind of forced into having a 3-year lease. And they will be renewing that next year. So they're beginning to look and see what device they're going to replace it with next year. And they also had to have insurance, and I'm going to be talking about insurance. It sounds odd, but it's very important. And the insurance was £47,000 over 3 years. And again, parents were asked to contribute, but they didn't have to. So if they could contribute, that was good. And about 30% of the parents were able to contribute something towards the insurance cost, but that was the only cost for parents at Honeywood. The other issue, which is absolutely huge, which I won't need to tell you about, is, of course, availability of broadband. And the school Honeywood had to install the highest width broadband available at the time. They now think it's not quite enough, amazingly. 18 months on, things move on so much. But the cost of that was £85,000, so an enormous sort of payout for that. But they had to do that in order to enable the tablets to be used. The process of integrating the tablets in schools was quite an interesting one. And as I said, the infrastructure, of course, was absolutely key. Making sure broadband was available, but also available in each classroom. And all the schools had to have advice and help on this. And we're finding now that that is the biggest issue, really, that being able to have access to broadband at all, but actually appropriate broadband at a cost that's affordable is a really big issue for these schools. Safety and theft concerns were massive, so all the parents and actually quite a lot of the teachers and even the pupils thought that they were going to have real problems with theft and maybe being mugged on the way to school, because everyone knew that children at this particular school, these particular schools had tablets. Actually, that hasn't been a problem. We haven't had one incident in any of the schools that we've been monitoring where there have been any cases of theft. Where there have been problems, big problems, are breakages. No one quite realised how vulnerable these iPad 2s were. Any of you and I can see quite a few of you who've got them in the room, you know that if you drop them, particularly the corners, they smash, don't they? And children probably aren't brilliant at looking after things. So breakages was a much bigger issue than anyone had really realised, around about 7%. Once the children learnt about its fragility, it got better. So the breakage rate went down through the year, because at first they were kind of slightly flinging them around. But they were quite protective of their device, and they were very careful to sort of have it and look after it. And when we first went into the schools, all the children in all the schools had their own cover. And that was very much part of personalising this device for them. It was my device, I'm going to put my own cover on it. What the schools have had to do now is replace it with really quite heavy, tough covers. They've all adopted one called Griffin, which is really tough, and you can kind of drop it and nothing happens. But it makes it very heavy for the children. I mean, quite noticeably so. So especially for year 7s, because they're quite little, you can sort of see them hauling around this big, tough device in this Griffin tablet. But it does make a difference. It really has helped enormously, and breakages have gone right down. The impact of tablets in the free schools, the main thing probably, is that sort of whole notion of pupil-led learning, and also motivation to learn. The schools had different aims for this. As I said before, Honeywood very much wanted to have a pupil-led learning philosophy. That was kind of where they were coming from. The other schools didn't particularly kind of have that as an aim, but it happened anyway. And motivation to learn was incredible and really did go up. Now, we said that we couldn't measure attainment, although we are trying, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But motivation to learn has been quite noticeable, and we heard that from the teachers, the parents who'd noticed this in their children, but also from pupils themselves who said, I'm finding school much more exciting, much more interesting now. I'm much more involved in my research, my schoolwork. Independent learning was something that was happening naturally, because if you have a device in your hand and you need to look something up, you do, and that was very interesting. But also communication and e-communication. We found that there was a massive increase in communicating, both pupil-pupil, but also between teacher and pupil. And what's really interesting, and all the schools that we've been into, is actually what's happening in terms of that communication. We're finding that children are sending their homework immediately to the teacher, and the teacher's responding immediately. Now, I would think, and I don't know how you would feel about this, but I would think if I was a teacher, I'm not sure that I would want lots of emails all evening from my pupils. But this seems to be working. Now, the teachers tell us that they find it easier, because actually you can respond immediately. And you don't have a pile of, the old days, piles of marking to do. You're actually keeping on top. But not only that, you're keeping on top of the individual child. So you know how that child's performing. And if one's falling behind a bit, you can help them. If one's soaring, you know that they're fine and you can let them get on with it a bit more. So you're really monitoring much more what's actually happening with the child. And the kind of immediacy seems to work very, very well indeed. So the children are actually having enormous benefit from getting instant feedback. Schools also tell us that children can work at different levels. So whereas in the old days, you used to have to sort of go in the middle, so that the ones who are sort of maybe wouldn't be able to keep up quite so well, and the ones who are soaring, everything would kind of be directed along the middle, and you'd be teaching, and hope that everyone fell in. Now, children can work at different paces and different levels, and that's actually enabled through the device. So quite a massive change, and I'm going to be telling you quite a bit about pedagogy at the end as well. The collaborative learning was another key thing that came through. And that increase in collaboration between pupils has been absolutely evident. Now, obviously, they're doing things like, social networking. FaceTime is very popular. But they're not messing around. They are playing games, of course they are, and they are, messing around with FaceTime. But actually, they're using it in very real ways and beneficial ways for learning as well. We found, interestingly, that Year 7, and remember they came into Year 7, were given a tablet on their first day almost in many of the schools. In Year 7, they seemed to cope very well indeed with having the tablet and found it easier. As we went up the school, and by the time we got to Year 11, the children really couldn't quite manage it, and it was the older children who were using it for games and trying to get on Facebook even though they weren't supposed to. And the younger children were kind of using it much more, taking it much more seriously. And that must be because they'd had several years in secondary school without using a one-to-one device, and kind of the notion of having this, the temptation was too great. But obviously we're now in Year 8, with the Year 7s are now Year 8s, and we think as we go through the school and it becomes much more part of the culture of the school, the novelty, if you like, of having a one-to-one device will be quite different. There's a huge culture of sharing apps. Content has been a massive issue, the lack of content, I should say, because the industry is only just kind of running to catch up, and I know that there are people in the room who kind of are very interested in content. And at the moment, it's a lot better this year than it was this time last year. And no doubt in a year's time it will be even greater. But content and being able to download the right apps has been a major challenge for the schools. They've tackled it very well. The children are brilliant at finding apps. And in every school we go to, we're told by the teachers that it's the children who come to them and say, oh, look, we've just found this app, it's amazing. And they're quite good, even, the children, of judging what is good content and what isn't. Obviously, the teacher always has an opinion. Also, the schools are very much thinking about innovative ways of teaching, how they can use this, and using content that you wouldn't normally use in education, partly because they had to, because there wasn't anything else available. But it's allowed teachers almost to kind of be a little bit freer. And we've witnessed some wonderful examples of teachers using content that you would think would be for a completely different reason, a different context, actually using it in a very, very positive way with the children. So that kind of innovative teaching that they didn't, they don't think of themselves as innovative teachers, but being enabled by having the use of a tablet, and for every child having a tablet, it actually seems to be prompting some sort of innovation in the way teaching is happening, which is quite exciting. And we're trying to grasp that and grasp what's going on. Every school has some sort of means of sharing apps with the rest of the school, and what's happening now with our schools that we're on our research is that they're sharing between each other, because there's a huge amount of knowledge in each school, and what we're trying to do is actually build up this network of schools so that the schools can actually exchange information, and that seems to be working quite well. So most schools have something like an app of the week. In most classrooms you go into, there's a list of apps that people have found and decided are quite useful and quite good. Some apps, of course, are free and some they have to pay for, and the parents pay for them. So the schools try to encourage free apps, obviously, but there is some payment that has to be made sometimes for very vital apps that seem to be very necessary. The other thing that's happening in all the schools, interestingly, is that teachers are beginning to create their own apps. And we think that that's going to be something that will grow and grow and grow, where there'll be actually teacher content produced for other schools to use. So what facilitated the successful adoption of tablets? And I have to say, it was successful. We haven't had, and a very small sample obviously, but it has been a very successful exercise. Now, I've been talking about iPads, and as we know, iPads are not the only tablets in the world. And we've been very keen, in fact almost desperate, and I've had several meetings with Apple and told them this, to get away from Apple. At the time when we started back in the autumn of 2011, of course Apple was the only tablet available, and it was the obvious choice. Now there are many, many more choices, and we are looking at schools that are using non-iPads, because that is a very key thing. But we were interested, of course, to know whether was the successful adoption because it was an iPad, because it was kind of a really cool thing for the children to have, and actually for the teachers as well, and for the school to say, we're using iPads. We're not sure, and it's very difficult to say at the moment. Certainly at the beginning, the children were just overwhelmed by the thought of having an iPad. When we went back to them even 6 months later, the fact that it was an iPad was neither here nor there. And interestingly, another school that we're now talking to and using in our research, Cramlington Learning Village in Northumberland, also adopted tablets. We didn't know at the time, but they'd also adopted tablets at the same time, but they were Samsung, so they were Android tablets. And the children there call them iPads. So it's almost as if iPads are a generic term for a bit like Hoover for tablets. We found that a really important thing was to engage parents very early on. As you might imagine, many parents were very wary, because they're very wary of technology anyway. Not all parents use technology in the way that perhaps we do every day. If they have jobs where they don't need to use, always be sending emails or always looking things up on the internet, they're not necessarily as experienced at using technology. And we know from other research that's been done in terms of child safety online, that often it's parents' fear and concern and lack of knowledge that actually can be a challenge and probably is important for them to understand a little bit more about. So engaging parents early on was very, very important. And actually what the schools did was have parents' evenings and actually have training sessions. Apple were very good in that they had Apple distinguished educators who came in and actually ran sessions with some of the parents. And then internally the schools, the ICT departments were very, very good as well in that they would help the parents understand what was happening with the device, how to use it, and how to look at the children, how to watch what the children were doing with it. Because part of this whole notion is about taking the tablet home. It's one thing to take it to school and use it in school, but another is to take it home and be using it at home as well. And there was a very interesting but very welcome side finding to this, in that schools reported that there was much, much more parental engagement than there ever had been before. So in some schools, there were some parents who they never saw, who would never turn up to parents' evenings, who really weren't that engaged with school. And we know why that might be, because of their own history perhaps. But now, because it wasn't about education, it wasn't about their child, it was about the tablet, they were attracting a lot more parents into the school, and there was a lot more kind of collaboration, if you like, between school and parents, and that really hadn't been expected by the schools. The other thing, of course, as you can imagine, was teacher engagement. So engaging teachers in this, you know, okay, you're going to be using a tablet next week. Now that's fine. And I have to say it was some of the younger teachers who probably had been using smartphones for, you know, a few years anyway, who were okay about it. And there were some difficulties, I have to say there were some difficulties with some of the teachers who actually felt quite alarmed, as you might, by suddenly being told that every child in your class is going to have their own tablet device. So again, reassuring teachers and actually training teachers was a very key part. They didn't need that much training. You know, it was thought it was going to be a much bigger issue than it was. And those of you who have a tablet, and you'll remember the first time you had a tablet, it actually, you kind of just get, it becomes intuitive. You kind of find your way through. You don't necessarily need to be taught in the same way that children certainly don't. They just start using it and somehow can use it. But teachers definitely did need and felt that they needed this training. So to put that in place was very, very important beforehand. So that was the background, and that's what happened. Sorry, my clicker's not quite working. Okay. So satisfaction, well, we talked about pupil motivation. That was obviously increased enormously. This new engagement with parents was something the schools really hadn't expected, but was absolutely key. And parents' understanding of technology. Now, I've talked about training. There were concerns expressed by parents, even those parents whose children have been using the tablets for about, 6 months, 9 months. So it kind of become part of their children's lives. They were still concerned, and a lot of it was around overuse of the tablet, overuse of digital technology, really, which we hear from parents anyway. And it did seem that schools needed and need to, and I think this is probably general in all schools, and I know schools do wonderful, wonderful evenings for parents, teaching them about safety online. But it does seem that parents need to be encouraged to put boundaries in. And boundaries about using it. You do not take your tablet to bed with you. You limit the time that the child's going to use it. I mean, I think that's just sensible advice to parents anyway. But because the device was coming from the school, parents felt that the school was somehow condoning the use of the tablet. And of course, actually, it's really important. It was very important that the tablet was taken home. But actually, it's really, really important that also the parents are encouraged to put in boundaries and have rules about when you can use this device and when you can't. And that was something that parents definitely need support on. So the concerns around introducing one-to-one tablets was very much about the cost. And actually, all the schools found their way through. And that's something that we're very much looking at now, where we're partnering with schools who are going through this process of thinking of introducing tablets and what do they do. And cost is obviously massive. And that's one of the areas that we very much feel that help is needed. So they need to have very sound advice about who to go to, where to go for financing and leasing arrangements, and almost who they can absolutely trust, because we've had some examples in some schools of schools being given quotes for things like Wi-Fi and implementation, and the quotes have been ridiculously high. So I think there is a sort of layer of protection. I mean, why would a school be expert in understanding these things? Of course not. So there is a layer there of expertise and help and advice that's needed, I think, to help these schools really know how to go about it. Lack of educational content, I've already mentioned. It is getting better, but it is still an issue. So lack of content that can be put onto the device is something that is a big hole. And again, a huge opportunity for someone or several people to get in there and really think about it. And then that sense of never being switched off, which I think we all have a concern about children. Actually, they're never switched off, as many of you aren't here. I mean, how many of you, will go home tonight and open your emails even though it's Friday night and just check, has anyone written to you? Maybe over the weekend as well. And I think that sense of actually, again, it's boundaries, isn't it? Actually encouraging children that they can switch off, they can do other things, is probably part of the thinking behind this. Okay. So the benefits, well, using at home is incredibly beneficial. The fact that it's touch screen and that they can design their own content is massive. I'm going to show you a little film about that in a minute. The benefits to SEN children have been massive also. We weren't expecting to find that, but it is fantastic, and we've actually sat in with some SEN children and just seen how they're actually able to communicate in the same way as their peers, which has been very beneficial to them and has really increased self-esteem, I think, and increased their confidence. And then freedom at school. We notice that when you go often to a tablet school and you think you're going to sit there and watch a lesson, and we've been in sometimes if we've been a little bit late into a lesson, and the classroom's empty. It's completely empty because all the children are out, outside taking pictures, filming, doing very, very innovative stuff. Now, in one way you could look at it and say, chaos, absolutely, no one's got control here. They have. And they're always brought back and they're always asked to show what they're doing. But the children have the freedom to go out and do their own thing with their tablet. And that really is quite extraordinary. Even a month ago in the snow, we witnessed children out in the snow filming. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly take you through the quantitative research that we did. With a nationally representative sample of teachers, and we found that 1 in 5 teachers are actually using their own device anyway, their own tablet at school, which is higher than the national population at that time. This was summer last year. It's gone up obviously since then, but so it does seem that teachers are early adopters of devices, which you probably won't be surprised to learn. And 3/4 were in favour of giving tablets, one-to-one tablets, to children in secondary schools. We found that 7 out of 10 agreed that if I was given sufficient training, again, training being so important, I think tablets would benefit my teaching. And the same number agreeing that tablets could make my lessons much more interactive and exciting. And agreeing that accessing the internet through using a tablet in class would help pupils' motivation to learn. And that's certainly what we found as well. And then 2/3, nearly, of teachers agreeing that using a tablet in class would be a great way to help my pupils improve their learning. Parents also, interestingly, thought it was a good idea. They liked the idea of one-to-one tablets in schools. So we have roughly about nearly 8 out of 10 parents agreeing with it. And not surprisingly, it was virtually 96% of children thinking having their own one-to-one device, one-to-one tablet would be a good idea. So just bringing all that together, it does appear that there's greater motivation to learn. It does appear that there's more collaboration happening between pupil-pupil, pupil-teacher, pupil-parent, parent-school, which I think is very exciting. It does seem that the classroom environment has improved in terms of more engaged pupils. It does seem that there's been improvements to communication between teachers and between parents and across schools as well, actually. So that collaborative sense that one-to-one devices seem to introduce is very good. We know that social media is very important to children anyway, and this seems to kind of resonate with children because they can see that their school are understanding that to some extent. Parents are reporting greater motivation and greater engagement from their children. Noticeable that parents feel more engaged with the school because the children are often bringing the tablet to the breakfast table the next morning and saying, look, I've done this, this and this, look at this, which they never did before. They never showed them their homework before, or certainly the parents we talked to. Some issues do remain. Home use and concern about never switching off is an issue. And parents' lack of technology is an issue as well. Teachers actually seem to welcome the change to pedagogy the tablets can offer. Children who previously struggled with their schoolwork, and especially SEN children, really do seem to be more highly motivated. There are differences with year groups. It seems to be better for the younger children than the older children. The older children are struggling a little bit more to sort of have this device which you know, they just see as a source of games and going on Facebook and Twitter. But that's maybe to be expected. There is a lack of curriculum-based content, but there is a great kind of sense of sharing and collaboration between teachers that's coming through. Innovative leadership is characteristic of the schools that we've looked at so far, and that's quite interesting and I think has driven a lot of the success of this at the moment. There are concerns, of course, around safety and security. I'm not saying that they weren't there, it's just that we didn't find any incidents of it, but as I said, breakages have been a big issue. The sense of teachers handling technology hasn't been as big as they thought it would be. So there is a sort of barrier there, but actually once they're through the barrier, they're enjoying it and loving it. And the experience is definitely enjoyable. So there is a change of pedagogy, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But first of all, I just want to show you a film. Okay, so I'm going to take you through next steps. If you think I'm talking rather a long time, it's because I think we have an issue with the next speaker. Speaker's turned up. Oh, okay, I can quickly hurry up, that's all right then. Okay, so just let me tell you quickly what's the next steps that we're doing. So we're now talking to this, right now, I've got researchers in all these schools today as we speak. Greenford School in Ealing, Alec Hunter in, sorry, I'm reading the wrong page here. Our existing schools, Honeywood, Wallace High and Longfield, we're still talking to and doing focus groups and monitoring how it's going on 18 months on. We've been joined, which we're delighted by Cramlington Learning Village in Northumberland, and we're really pleased about them because they're using Samsung tablets, not iPads. We're talking to... Sorry. We're also have recruited 3 schools, one Greenford High School in Ealing, Alec Hunter, which was our control school last time in Essex, and also Dixon's Academy in Bradford. And as you can see, they've been given different tablets. So again, we were very anxious to look at different tablets. So Greenford have got Sony, Alec Hunter have got Acer and Samsung, and they're being supported by Microsoft Windows 8. And Dixon's Academy are using Samsung as well. And our third cohort is 2 additional schools. So Easter Academy, which I'm sure you'll all know about, who introduced very innovatively one-to-one iPod touches in 2009. So they were incredibly innovative. But just before Christmas, they gave every child an iPad 3. So we're doing research there. And then UCL Academy in London, a brand new school. They were meant to move into the brand new school in September. The building wasn't quite ready, so the children and staff were spread all over London. They've now moved into the school in Swiss Cottage, and we're going through their journey with them as well. So we're doing 9 schools altogether, spread across the UK, and a mix of tablet devices with a focus on Year 7. And we're very, very happy to have an academic advisors, both on our both looking at research, but also pedagogy, because pedagogy is so important. We know these things are happening, but we really want to monitor it. So some of you, I'm sure, will know these people. David Buckingham, who has been around a long time, he's Professor of Media Studies at Loughborough, but he was at the Institute of Education. And Colleen McLaughlin, who is Professor of Education both at Sussex and Cambridge. And they're helping us on advising us on pedagogy, and we meet up on a regular basis, and there's quite a lot of crossover. Also on that is Anne Davis from Longfield. We're very delighted to have, and Simon Mason as well, so that we've got people at the coalface looking at it. And we're looking at some of these issues, which I'm going to very quickly just sum up. Self-led learning, co-creation, and collaboration along the lines that I've explained, and we're looking kind of in depth at those things. We're also attempting to measure attainment, but it is incredibly difficult, because how do we know that the attainment, and there are improvements in attainment in the schools that we're looking at, how do we know it's to do with the iPad? It's very, very difficult to prove, but as you can imagine, everybody wants to know that. So I'm going to leave it there. I would like to say that we are very keen to talk to anyone, and when I say we, not just the research, I mean tablets for schools, very keen to talk to anyone who has an interest in this, knows about one-to-one tablets, is a school that has either introduced one-to-one tablets that we haven't yet discovered, or is about to introduce one-to-one tablets. Please, please, please contact us, because the more we find out, the more we can help. Do look at the website. It changes all the time, and it's going to get bigger and bigger. Thank you very much indeed.